That look okay? Okay. Start my timer as well. All right. Hey, everyone. Today, I'm coming to you from beautiful Nepal. We're going to be talking about the Bagmati River Basin Improvement Project. This is the Bagmati River here in a picture from the 80s. So initially, when I started into this project, I was very focused on this individual project that's being undertaken by the Nepali government, but this presentation has turned into a bigger exploration of water resources in Nepal and the question of gray infrastructure to address some of these issues. So, and I did a bit of a weird presentation by making it a story map because I wanted to show some maps, but essentially it's mostly a PowerPoint. It's a little odd. I wouldn't do it again, but here we are. So. The setting here is the Kathmandu Valley. We see here the urban center of Kathmandu, surrounded by forested mountains here. Oops, did I miss? So the valley itself is 525 square kilometers. And again, this is just the valley right in there where the urban area is and expanding. So first to talk a bit about urbanization in the Kathmandu Valley. The population as of 2022 in the valley itself is around 3 million. The greater population in Nepal is around 30 million, so it's about 10% of the country's population. But it is growing at a rate of 6.5% annually, compared to 1.8% annual population growth in the larger Nepali population. So it's a pretty high rate of urbanization. This is driven, for example, around 1 million people, 1.1 million in 1991, to 2.5 million in 2011, and here we are at 3 million. And this has been driven by a variety of factors. There's been political crisis, mostly in the early 2000s was a lot of that, and then also just a general transition from agricultural to an urban economy, desire for education, and many of the factors we've heard from other case studies in this course. As part of this urban transition, urbanization, there's been a decrease in agricultural land within the Kathmandu Valley from 62 to 42% between 1984 and 2000. I couldn't find more recent data than that, but in this land use change is often in what sources I was reading is described as unplanned urbanization. Just due to the haphazard nature of impervious surfaces being constructed and, sort of a bit of a lack of regulation and there's this high rate of growth that's difficult to manage. This development began in a significant way in the 70s and 80s because Nepal was fairly removed from the global community and was not very open to the global community until the middle of the 20th century. So it's a bit of background there. And there's just a photograph. Oh, wait a minute. It's a little bit of a delay, I think. Sorry. I'll get a handle on this. Yeah, no, this was easy over Zoom, but a bit different here. Yeah, that's the urban area. Moving on. Just to talk a bit about water availability, the bigger picture about water in the Kathmandu Valley. So there's really a lot of water on an annual basis, 55 inches annually. Looking at this Falcon Mark index, which is this is total renewable water resources per capita, and it's sort of a global index to measure water stress. And Nepal ranks very well on this index. It's over 7,000 cubic meters per year of renewable water resources per individual. The South Asia median is about 2,500, and actually to get to the point of being classified as water scarce is around 1,500, and then is down to 500 for severe water scarcity. So on that metric, Nepal has a lot of water, but this water comes in the form of really seasonal rainfall because of the monsoonal climate. So you see in this chart here, annual rainfall really peaks, July to September, but the rest of the year is quite dry. And this actually has created a situation of chronic household water scarcity in the Kathmandu Valley. This water percolates into groundwater aquifers, also flows through the Bagmati River, which I mentioned at the beginning and we'll be discussing a bit soon. But just to give a visual for this seasonality, the Bagmati River can shrink to 3% of its peak size during the dry season. Okay, so I'm going to introduce an idea here, which we will be revisiting later in the presentation, but it's this concept of seasonal storage capacity and its relationship with development, so this is a study based on a study Shimon had shared with me by Brown et al., 2006. And to quote them, they found a statistically significant relationship between greater rainfall variability and lower per capita GDP. It's important to note this is there's some controversy around this, but that is the suggestion in that paper. And this seasonal storage capacity is based on a measurement called seasonal storage index, which represents the volume of rainwater storage needed to meet the annual demand. And so Nepal has the fourth, based on the amount of rainfall available. So Nepal has the fourth highest seasonal storage index in the world, which they need to sequester the equivalent of 47% of their annual rainfall volume to meet the current needs. Needs actually as of 2006, but we see urbanization's been increasing. And this was actually the second highest seasonal storage index of all countries in the world. Many of these countries are African nations, so Nepal is a little bit unique in that geographically. And this other interesting point here is the study noted that Nepal currently has 0% capacity to store rainwater, but as we will get into right now, this does miss some of the local rainwater harvesting techniques. So it is impossible to quantify sort of the with a number what their storage capacity is based on local techniques, but it certainly is not zero, and historically has not been zero, as we'll see. So, moving a bit to water access in the Kathmandu Valley. As of 2020, the estimated demand is 370 million liters per day annually, and daily. But that's the regular demand, and then the public utilities is one source of water. And actually, this quote. So I was speaking with one of our classmates, Bibek Stresa, and he's from Nepal, and actually talking with him is what gave me the idea to look into Nepal for this case study. But he described it as about 1 to 2 days a week access of water. But to put that in more quantitative terms, this is the Nepali Water Authority, and can provide about 110 million liters per day. And this study estimated 40% of that water is lost, and couldn't quite get to what that was, but probably poor infrastructure, leakages, things like that. Another study from the Japan International Cooperation Agency is their development agency is that 66%, and this is 2016, estimated 66% of households lacked access to private water supply during the dry season, whether piped or from groundwater. So here I'll talk about getting into these. We see a picture here. This is a New York Times article called "The Merchants of Thirst," and these are what are known as tanker owners, tanker operators. And according to Bibek, and from what I was reading, these are actually these individuals. They fill fill tankers full of water from streams on the margins of the Kathmandu Valley, or they have some commercial wells in some cases. And they're going around and providing it as a service to the people in the city. And this is actually the most reliable source of water that people have because of the poor municipal infrastructure and just the water scarcity. And there is some concern from the government and from scientists in Nepal that the poorly regulated pumping of this water, whether it's collected from streams or in some cases they pump near the Bagmati River, the effects that'll have on groundwater levels. But so the government actually requires labeling of the source on these tankers of where they're getting their water, but that's poorly enforced. Other ways of collecting water is some household rainwater collection during the rain season, as well as groundwater wells, which we'll discuss briefly here, I mean, I pulled this figure off, but just to give a sense that Kathmandu is here in this valley, in sort of a sandy, fertile valley between these mountains, north to south here. There is shallow groundwater available in more shallow aquifers, and then there's a deep fossil aquifer, actually with bedrock in here, which seems sort of geologically unique to me. But anyway, people now, the groundwater levels have been dropping, and people are beginning to tap into this water, which is depleting fossil aquifer water, which is not great, and so there's some concern about this. So to actually explore another source of water for the people of the Kathmandu Valley, I learned about this traditional management system called Hiti, and it's an ancient system of water management. So if you all remember from the case study when we had we learned about Delhi and how there were multiple historic cities in Delhi, and it was a similar case with Kathmandu. There were 4 historic cities, each with their own Hiti system, sort of self-contained system of water management, which involved a network of ponds, canals, underground clay pipes with their own filtration systems that supplied water as a public utility, and this was viewed as religiously significant, a public service, that everyone should have access to clean water. So they actually have, the oldest pipeline known that is still in use dates from 590 CE. So this is really quite an old system, and really has fallen out of use largely since the 19th century with the introduction of some pipes and more modern infrastructure. But certainly the urban development has really been disrupting this system, and a lot of it's being paved over and destroyed through construction. And it takes advantage of the gravitational potential of the mountains that fringe the Kathmandu Valley and natural springs. And as I mentioned, the system of community management of the Hiti system is called Guti. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing half these things right, but I tried to check with Vivek, but he's too polite to tell me. And actually, a fun fact was that apparently when they would get clogged, they were cleaned by sending frogs and snakes through the pipes, which I found a pretty amazing detail. Many have been destroyed or disrupted at this point. However, this is the most important thing I didn't mention, 20% of the population of the Kathmandu Valley, according to Nepal's Central Bureau of Statistics, 20% of the valley still relies on this system for some of their water needs, drinking, bathing, washing. Here we see a woman collecting water out of one of these ancient spouts. And here's just a quick diagram of how it works. You have storage ponds, and you have the underground pipes, and just a quick visual of that. And here's one of these ponds. Oops. There are 2 of these ponds, actually, that still exist in the city. Just the beautiful detail on these spouts as well. And this is a spout that was dry, has been really dried up through, I guess there was a industrial facility that's really been siphoning off water nearby. So to revisit this seasonal storage capacity idea, now we're going to get into some gray infrastructure projects. So I pulled this quote. It's a bit long, but I'm going to read it. Fill up some time. No, kidding. But because I think it's important. So during the last century, the most prominent response to dry season water scarcity was the construction of dams. Toward the end of the century, a reevaluation of the benefits and costs of dam construction led to a consensus shift away from this approach. Management alternatives and efficiency improvements, including the adjudication of water rights, privatization of water supply companies, development of water markets, and investment in water-saving technology were heralded as the preferred methods for solving water scarcity issues. In nations that lack water infrastructure, such recommendations have been received with skepticism. So it speaks for itself. This is the first gray infrastructure project we'll look at is the Malamchi water supply project, which is an interbasin transfer project. Here we see a map of, here's Kathmandu here. This is a almost 27-kilometer tunnel, which is bringing water from a different basin and eventually will be multiple basins. The project is still under the way. We'll get into the timeline in a minute, but it's supposed to provide 510 million liters per day. And we discussed earlier, there's that 260 million liter per day shortage, so it's going to address the water shortage in Kathmandu. Here's just the stated objective: improving health, particularly of the poor, and addressing this water scarcity. This recently has faced some real setbacks just due to natural disasters. So the earthquake in 2015, which I'm sure many of us remember from the news, really devastating earthquake in Nepal. This was the intake area for that tunnel in the Malamchi project, which is, you can see these are the roofs of buildings. So like meters of material here of debris covering the intake, which had to be excavated. And then again in June 2021, there was serious flooding from glacial melt, which destroyed a lot of homes and communities, and also really messed with the headworks of the Malamchi project. And it's still being rebuilt from that. Bibek did tell me that in the city itself, a lot of the infrastructure has been put in place in terms of to supply this water when it does come, but there's still to be a dam constructed as part of this project to hold more water, and that hasn't been even started, and this damage is still being addressed, and there are delays. And so to get into the urban-rural aspect of this a little bit, so here is the area where the water is coming from. It's kind of not the greatest map, but you have Kathmandu city here, and I found well, actually, first I'll say that as part of the project, the government's initiative, there's a social upliftment element, which divides these rural communities into village development committees. I found this study, which called Impacts of Malamchi Water Supply Project in Socioeconomic Development of this district. I pulled just a few pieces of information here quickly that surveying 8 of these village development communities out of a total of 11, I believe, on their opinions on whether this project so far has addressed some of the promises that were made to them about economic development, education, a variety of things. But I picked out, so economic development, for example. And first, it's important to note that they also broke it down by the class of people who they interviewed, because it's in Hinduism, and it's a Hindu, or was a Hindu kingdom. But anyway, the lowest class was represented the least in this surveying. I think that's important to note. But 31% of respondents agreed that there had been some economic development. 34% disagreed, and I guess the others were strongly. It was honestly a bit hard to get through this paper, which has been an interesting part of this whole project. But anyway, there's a bit split on that economic development front, and road construction was a bit more black and white. I guess it's clearer, you build a road or you don't. 76% saw a benefit. And so talking to Bibek about this, on the one hand he said people have sort of wrapped their heads around that the central government will do what it wants to manage its water resources. It has that power. He said there were political negotiations, but it was not very bottom up. But at the same time, he did say also that the Nepali people, especially people in rural areas, often will view infrastructure of any kind as some form of development, especially people in this area really don't have access to roads and things that can improve their economic situation and access to healthcare, things like that. So that's part of the picture here. So now, looking back in the Kathmandu Valley, I'm going to zoom in and to think a little bit about the Bagmati River, which is the main river flowing through the city there. It is considered a holy river in Nepal. It's its most sacred river. Passes by multiple temples we can see there, where pilgrims come to bathe. Important cremation sites to the Hindu people, and as well as other Sino-Tibetan ethnic groups. So just wanted to make a note of its significance culturally and religiously. So to discuss some of the impacts of urban growth on the Bagmati River, this impervious surface construction is really the biggest disruptor. It's a naturally spring-fed river. So this construction is blocking recharge from rainwater in natural springs. There's illegal dumping. Solid waste is an issue. High concentrations of toxic metals, toxic chemicals. Fecal coliform, pretty much anything you could list is on this list. So low dissolved oxygen, high biological oxygen demand. There's a wastewater treatment issue as well, just with the poor infrastructure. So 95% of untreated sewage effluent flows into the river, most of this from domestic sources, and it makes the water really unsuitable for drinking, bathing, which bathing is important for spiritual reasons at these temples and for aquatic life. And just a note too, it was really not that long ago, and a lot of what I was reading, you'd find vignettes from people who really just 20, 25 years ago, certainly into the 80s, 70s, the water was just noticeably cleaner. A lot of people, so this has been a really rapid change due to this urban development. So to give a bigger picture of the Bagmati River Basin, 3,500 square kilometer watershed. So here, this is kind of a not great map, but here you have the Kathmandu Valley here, and this is the Bagmati River's headwaters, so it's just 15 kilometers north of the city, so it's really towards the headwaters. And the watershed goes down a ways here, and this, the important thing from this is that, so Bibek did point me also to an expedition that was done, the Bagmati River expedition in 2015. Some of his friends actually and colleagues were on this, Nepal River Conservation Trust, in the Biosphere Association there in Nepal. I'm not sure why this is a cross-section sort of their sampling sites from the headwaters down to the sort of end of the watershed. 160 is the sort of end here. -40 is the top. Kathmandu is sort of seemingly arbitrarily located here at 15, but we can see you hit the discharge in terms of actual volume of water flowing to the river coming from the headwaters. Even decreases a bit, could be partly due to the impervious surface construction issue, but also it's just really far up there in the headwaters, and you have these other tributaries joining below the Kathmandu Valley, and you have discharge increasing there, but it's really in a couple cubic meters per second around the city, and it gets down to peak, somewhere around 80, somewhere in there, kilometers. And a quick note, I'm going to have to move a little faster here, I think, but just that south of the southern end of the watershed dips into this area, agricultural region called the Terai. Just to give a little bit of context here, the southern end of Nepal is a flatter agricultural area. I'll just go past that a bit right now for time's sake. The northern end of the watershed is in this national park, 159 square kilometers. And it's a major catchment area for Kathmandu. It's a popular destination for recreation. There's some holy sites within the park, and it's sort of a temperate tropical transition zone with many, dominated by pine and oak, but some plant diversity there, and ecologically important area. Here's a picture of that, and here is just the boundary of that park. So here's the city, and you have the park there. Getting into the meat of the project here, which is the Bagmati River Basin Improvement Project, which is an initiative of the government of Nepal funded by Asian Development Bank, initiated in 2014. Significant influx of cash, $63 million coming again in 2019. And the goal is to improve water security, resilience to climate change, to build a reservoir to charge the downstream Bagmati River, and to restore the Kathmandu Valley. The first element of this that we'll look at here is increased water availability in the basin during the dry season. So this has to do with that reservoir charge and the seasonal storage capacity concept we've talked about. Here again we see the park, and zooming in to the park is the first dam of two that are part of this project, and it's been constructed just recently, finished in October. And it's within the park. It's really, as you can see, kind of at the headwaters there, so it's collecting rainwater really at the headwaters of the river to store water in the dry season. I'll skip the picture, but it's a 24-meter concrete face rock-filled dam with an 861,000 square meter storage capacity. And there was an environmental impact assessment done. They had to cut down a bunch of trees. So here are some community members doing a 90,000 tree mitigation effort, which is underway in other areas of the park that have been cleared. And again, the stated purpose of this project is to enhance water resources, increase water discharge in the dry season is really a significant part of this, to improve biodiversity, improve river quality. And then there's another dam which has passed its environmental impact assessment, but has not been constructed yet. A much bigger dam. Here we can see it's downstream of the DOP dam, much larger reservoir, 10 times the volume, and it's a 94.5 meter tall dam with a planned storage capacity of 8.8 million cubic meters. And it will also have a hydropower element of it. And these are some of the facts, statistics there, but it will supposedly increase dry season flow of 400 liters per second and create 2.12 megawatts of energy. So, and some of the studies I looked at, they're saying, based on these estimates, it actually needs to operate at near its full capacity in terms of storage to meet this 400 liters per second goal. And here's just a diagram, government diagram. You have the DOP dam and then the proposed reservoir here. And obviously there will be consequences to this ecologically. Not so much in terms of displacing people because it's a national park and without many people living there. So just a quickly note on this that the project includes non-gray infrastructure components such as participatory river basin management. I just wanted to sort of make mention of this and show these photos. And there have been over 450 weeks of these river cleanups, which are done by volunteers, organized through the project. BBEC did mention that it really has made visible changes in several areas of the city, and it's a popular program, sort of indicative of the sense of stewardship people have over the river. It's a lot of data. I don't usually like to do this on slides, but I did want to just show this to discuss briefly. We saw the agricultural region downstream, thinking about will these dams improve water quality downstream? So that 2015 river expedition where they sampled the water down the watershed, we saw that the discharge map, but here is also with Kathmandu around 15 here, E. coli. So you have higher E. coli concentration in the city, and then, but even as you go downstream here, 160 kilometers, it's decreasing, but at this rate here. So there is an effect downstream on people using this water. This is just a water quality index that they used multiple physiochemical parameters here to rank the water on quality from very bad to excellent. So around Kathmandu it's quite bad, and it increases but never goes back to sort of where it was in the headwaters here, all the way down at the bottom of the watershed. So, and these are ammonium, heavy metals, chemical oxygen demand. At this 15 here is Kathmandu. So the only thing was ammonium that was an issue towards the headwaters, but you see these are exceeding Nepali guidelines for water quality. All the way down the watershed, a lot of these are very persistent, and they note in the report, although the improvements of river quality can be seen with some increasing discharge, which corresponds to distance, it's clear that even doubling discharge, so when you get to 70 kilometers, it has not increased. They say it has not caused direct increase in water quality. A bit subjective, I guess, but it's important to note, I think, thinking about the impact of these dams and flushing out this pollution will be. So we have a history of dams in Nepal here. It's not a new thing. The first hydroelectric dam went in 1911. These are large dams, and a lot of numbers here, which I don't have enough time to go into, but basically the important thing to note is that Nepal is constructing a lot of dams and has a lot of dams in the planning phases of construction. There are a lot of development agencies, Asian Development Bank, other groups, that are helping to finance these, China, Japan, and there's a lot of interest in the Nepali government and among the people, to some respect, based on, of course, that's a complicated thing, and you have to get into many of the issues we discussed in this class. But essentially, I just need one more minute. Is that okay? Okay. Yeah. I'm almost done here. So, a significant thing about this is that most of these dams have been run-of-river dams, so they're not taking advantage of the water available on a yearly level. They're beholden to this seasonality of water. But 16 of these dams that are currently in planning as of 2022 will be reservoir dams, which is a really different type of dam than has been typical in Nepal in its era of dam building. Just to show a few headlines here, the 2015 earthquake damaged a lot of dams. There's concern about reservoir-induced seismicity. It's a seismically active area. You have all this weight of the water in these reservoirs. Feibel said that there is concern among people in Kathmandu about the Bagmati Dam in particular, with its proposed height and being right above the city, holding all this water back in a massive reservoir when you've had a history of dams recently sustaining damage. And we saw the damage that occurred to the Malamchi water supply project. You don't have that glacial threat here because the headwaters are not in a glacial area, but you still have a threat of earthquakes. And there's just this renewed interest in the Hiti traditional management system. Since the earthquake in particular, this is Miss Nepal Earth saying, reviving the Hiti can supplement the city's modern water supply system, which has fallen short of demand for a long time. So there is renewed interest, and Feibel mentioned that community governments are showing more interest in advocating for rediscovering these and reviving this system. And so here we have, this is Miss Nepal Earth here, with archaeologists uncovering some of these Hiti, this Hiti infrastructure. This is the last thing here. I just wanted to conclude it with this. Thinking about the seasonal storage capacity, you have one vision of generating this with large dams, and then you have the fact that this, contrary to the 0% estimate in the Brown paper, you have a long history of seasonal rainwater storage in ancient Nepal to the present to some degree. So that's it. Okay. Oh, I guess we do questions? Yeah, sure. I took up half of it talking, but yeah.
When you were talking about the tankers earlier, I believe in the presentation, how do people pay to access that tanker water? Like, is it affordable to most people? Is there like extortion as part of that? I think the phrase merchants of thirst.
Sure. Yeah.
It's
exactly. I know I introduced that heading and then didn't go into too much depth about that. But yeah, I read that article, and they're called the merchants of thirst because, well, a lot of people view them very positively in terms of because they provide this necessary resource. That article did quote a number of local people who called them criminals, said they should be locked up because they're charging, sometimes exorbitant prices for this water. It's sort of unregulated. They're charging more than than the government would charge, than what is fair, probably often. So it does come at that price, this lack of regulation.
And water quality concerns.
And water quality, yeah. Water quality is an issue because they're drawing it from who knows where. I mean, they're supposed to label it, but even so, they're drawing it from streams, and it's not treated or anything. Yeah, so that's definitely.
Did you see in your research any tension between, larger, municipal level federal government and local community governments in trying to bring back kind of community managed water in the Hiti process?
Yeah.
Pushback, or are they kind of like, sure?
That did just make me think of one thing that I didn't mention here. In terms of tension with political tension, Feibel told me that there was a prime minister, I think the last prime election, I'm not sure exactly when, but there's actually, these water merchants are, the tanker owners have power because of the money they have and the service they provide, and the last prime minister, I guess, actually in a speech blamed the water tanker owners partly for the lack of progress on Malamchi, the interbasin transfer project, that they have a political interest, they have an economic interest in not having that project finished because it will destroy their whole system. But you're talking about the Hiti system. I didn't dive too deep into that. I sort of found out about it more recently, but I think it seems to be a local government thing right now that they're trying to revive this. I don't know if they have opposition. I mean, you can find publications on it. A few academics, it looks like, have written recent things on it, trying to understand it better and talk about its value. And then you have that clearly a public figure in Nepal there advocating for it. So I don't know how politically charged it is. I think the government has its own political interest in completing these infrastructure projects, or at least showing progress, because those are seen as economic development opportunities. Yeah.
Does the foreign financing for the infrastructure projects come with strings attached?
Yeah, that's definitely a good question. Originally, I wanted to make that more part of this presentation because I'm interested in that too. I was looking at a lot of the documents that they publish, because they publish like quarterly reports on progress, and for one, it is sort of amazing to me the money involved. And these, Nepal does go into debt. Malamchi was $471 million so far since the 70s, and it's not even done. And they're in debt $471 million. First, it was the World Bank, and then they dropped the project in the late 90s, I think, because it wasn't happening, and and the Asian Development Bank took it on. So they are taking on debt, and I don't know. That's definitely an important consideration, especially with the risk to these projects from destruction, and that's a big question, I think.
I'll just add broadly, I mean, the flip side of that is these are, important safeguards that if you're getting financing from the development bank, that they are somewhat sensitive to environmental and social issues that happen during and around dam construction in a way that other players aren't. So not that they're, angels, but
yeah, clearly they have been patient with some of these projects. I don't know if patient's the right word, but timelines have been adjusted many times, and they still have funding according to the reports for these projects. So, yeah. Okay. Oh, I have the.
You did it to you, and that makes total sense. All right, awesome.